On July 4, 1890, Boise's newspaper, the Idaho Statesman, announced that the Idaho Statehood Bill had been passed with little debate and fanfare. Short congratulations were given by U.S. senators to the sole Idaho delegate, but soon after, the monotonous drone of other Senate business continued. Such was the official start of the state of Idaho. The following day, the newspaper reprinted an article from the Salt Lake Tribune announcing that Idaho would join as a, quote, full equal in the sisterhood of states, with its skies full of promise, with its soil full of resources, and its people full of hope. In fact, the article continued, there is not a cloud in the future, and the nation does not yet half appreciate the splendor of Idaho. Finally, the author proudly stated that Idaho can put under cultivation more land than any 2 New England states, probably more than any 3, and the land is as rich as the valley of the Nile. And thus, Boiseans entered a new decade, full of promise and transition, as citizens of the newest capital city in the United States. The 1890s brought political turmoil, an economic depression, and an imperial war to America. Residents of Boise saw their hometown go through tremendous growth in both population and status, as the new capital quickly attracted many prominent businessmen, such as architect James King, future Senator William Borah, and clothier Moses Alexander, who quickly ascended the social ladder despite his presumably outsider status as a German-born Jew. After all, just about everyone in Boise in the 1890s was an outsider. Alexander established one of the finest clothing stores in downtown Boise, and he came to be known as the one-price clothier. After several different locations, Alexander built a new building downtown in 1925 with a beautiful white terracotta facade, which is still a distinctive landmark even today. He also achieved quick success in politics, successfully serving 2 terms as mayor, 2 terms as the only Jewish governor of Idaho, and led the charge to build Ahavath Beth Israel, the longest-serving synagogue west of the Mississippi. The Moorish, Romanesque synagogue was dramatically moved in 2003 from downtown to its current location on the bench. In 1897, the same year that he won the mayor's spot, Alexander had a beautiful Queen Anne home built just east of downtown on State Street. This home was built for $32,000 using plans Alexander found in the newspaper and includes all the requisite Queen Anne features. Today, it is owned by the state of Idaho and is one of the best examples of Gilded Age architecture in Boise. Symbolic of the expanding city was the construction and then dedication of Harrison Boulevard, stretching north of town into what would eventually be platted as Boise's North End. In 1878, Boise's first expansion, Arnold's Addition, had created the area around Hyde Park. Several other additions in 1891 set the scene for both the extension of 17th Street towards the foothills and the creation of rail service into Hyde Park. To celebrate Idaho's statehood, albeit 1 year tardy, President Benjamin Harrison visited Boise in 1891, and in commemoration, Boiseans renamed 17th Avenue Harrison Boulevard, where a unique mix of homes and residents have sprung up along one of our city's most beautiful streets. Indeed, in the 1890s, Boiseans experienced a number of life-changing expansions to the city's infrastructure that included the establishment of the Oregon Shortline Railroad, featuring a depot with a Prussian helmet tower on Front Street, the replacement of the city's horse-drawn streetcars with the electric variety in a system that would eventually travel from near the penitentiary all the way to Caldwell, and a highly contentious planning effort to build what would be called the New York Canal that would provide irrigation and water to the valley's farmers. An equally important development was the harnessing of the geothermal springs east of town. Boise established the first geothermal heating district in the world in 1892, when the Boise Artesian Hot and Cold Water Company began using the hot water to provide heat to homes and businesses along what is now known as Warm Springs Avenue. Banker C.W. Moore, who was also one of the founding partners of the Boise Artesian Hot and Cold Water Company, commissioned architect James King to build an imposing Queen Anne-style mansion at 1109 Warm Springs Avenue. The house, which featured both gas and electric lights, was also the first home in the United States heated with geothermal energy. For entertainment, one couldn't beat taking the trolley car down Warm Springs to the incredible indoor swimming pool known as the Natatorium. Fed by the springs and called the Nat by locals, the building was designed in a Moorish palace style, including Turkish baths, and was accompanied by an amusement park named White City Park, featuring a scenic railway or roller coaster. By the mid-1890s, East Boise was certainly the place to go. Unfortunately for everyone, the wooden Nat eventually blew down in a windstorm in 1934, but young and old alike still visit the city swimming pool and hydro slide that took its place. The park was named after its Chicago namesake, which had also been built in the early 1890s for the World's Fair in Chicago. The Columbian Exposition, as it was officially named, became quite important for the future of Boise after a number of prominent businessmen, and notably women, which included town matriarch Julia Davis, coordinated the Idaho exhibit housed inside the influential and rustic log cabin called the Idaho Building. From these efforts came the creation of the important Columbian Club in Boise, which helped bring the Carnegie Library to town in 1905. Also, Tom Davis eventually listened to his wife's pleas to bring the City Beautiful concept, seen in Chicago's White City, to Boise, and this resulted in the creation of Julia Davis Park, the first of a series of Boise City parks named for women, now known as the String of Pearls, along the Boise River. The 1890s also saw Boise's first Catholic high school established, a number of theaters built, and the creation of baseball, basketball, and football leagues. But despite the decade's reputation as the gay 90s, national political and economic troubles visited even Boise, as evidenced by the fights in the legislature over the use of silver in the money supply. Idaho had turned somewhat radical in the 1890s, even voting for James Weaver, the populist candidate for president in 1892. In a sign of the times, local politics was roiled with fights between Democrats and Republicans. But, as befitted the Gilded Age, these fights were masked by great architecture as an elegant, Romanesque city hall was constructed in town. With declining silver prices depressing Idaho mines and a persistent economic panic affecting Boise's economy, the town's two main banks struggled to stay afloat. Boise City National Bank had opened in 1886 to compete with First National Bank of Idaho, and in the 1890s was guided by Albert Oath. In 1896, the bank opened in its new location, designed by James King, in an elegant new Richardsonian Romanesque stone building. With 2-foot stone walls of sandstone and a hefty basement safe, the bank represented safety and security for Boiseans. The bank stayed strong through stiff competition in the new century, until 1932, when it was forced to close by a panic even worse than 1893. The building still stands today, and has recently been remodeled to include a local restaurant and offices. While Boise had its share of Gilded Age competitive politics and economic issues, locals saw new and beautiful additions to their town. No longer just a dirty frontier crossroads, Boise had earned its place as the capital of America's newest state. Certainly the 1890s were a time of growth and transition for Boiseans, and as the 19th century came to a close, locals braced for what would be an explosion of building in downtown Boise, such as befit a new century full of promise.